Let's move on to Gunslinger. And we're going to be going back through a lot of these because Gunslinger has a lot of synergies with a lot of other classes in a lot of their handguns. Anyway, first up we got the nail gun, or sorry, the nail bomb, not nail gun. Nail gun's up there. Nail bomb is probably like B tier for a grenade. It's pretty good. It stuns pretty effectively. It's nice since it got buffed. It has shrapnel so it can punch through multiple enemies. That's all good. It is kind of inconsistent though, and it's not super consistent at getting stuns either. But it's a decent grenade. It's also okay to take on Survivalist. I don't think I mentioned the Molotov when we were talking about that with Firebug, so I guess I'll go over that now. It's not really that great on Survivalist. Basically, we're stuck with it if you wanted to go with Weapon Harness before, but now that that's been taken care of to where you can kind of take whatever, it's probably one of the worst grenades for them because it's so easy to hurt yourself with. Then we have the starting pistol. This is the 1858. This is just one of them. I'd put this one like C tier. It's fine. It's cheap, which is a big advantage, especially if you pick it up off the ground. You're not going to be upset. Same with any class that picks up an 1858. It's good. It does okay damage. It has actually pretty good scaling too. Pretty good on Survivalist as well. It's not a bad option if you just want to take this, especially if you only want to take one because it's super cheap. It's like $100. And refilling it with ammo is really good too, but you're probably going to outgrow that. Dual 1858s, I'm going to put a little bit higher into B tier. I think they're actually pretty good. They scale fairly well. They're not as good as some of the other weapons that you get. With Survivalists, they're a decent option to start out with if you want, and they're a decent option later on. They'd probably be lower. They'd probably like C tier for Survivalist, but A tier for Gunslinger. Still really good for getting all your headshot damage and everything in. A single 1911 is also probably like C tier. It's pretty good. It does good damage per second. It reloads fast. It fires fast. Doesn't scale as well as like the 1858s, but is still pretty good. And I do like taking these because they don't weigh that much either. I also like taking mostly any of the single handguns as off-perk weapons for other classes. 1911 is a really good option for that too. And this is good on Survivalist as well. I'd probably also say it's like C tier. Dual 1911 is a bit better, probably like B tier as well. They are faster firing and faster reloading than something like the 1858s, but they do less damage. So they're pretty comparable to these. These ones I tend to prefer a little bit more, whether that be the faster rate of fire or just the skins I have on them. They are pretty nice, so B tier seems fair. On Survivalist, they're fine. They're probably like C tier on them too. And then we have a Winter Bite. A Winter Bite's pretty good. Winter Bite's like, actually I'd probably put it C tier for a single one because one isn't super consistent about freezing things. It does do good damage. For some reason, this still counts as an explosive projectile, so Siren Screams can get rid of it though, which is a little bit weird. Good on Boss Wave. Better with two of them though. Two of them is much higher. Two Winter Bites I would say is like A tier. A much better option. Since it does do good damage, it does have good scaling, it can freeze big things like bosses. It's actually really good on Boss Wave, and on like Survivals, it's actually pretty good too. I'd probably still say this is like A tier on them if you want to take it for that purpose as well. The Grenade Pistol I'd say is lower. Grenade Pistol I'd probably say is like B tier for Gunslinger, just because you can rack them up with this, and it is good against crowds. It's also good against flesh pounds, but it's not as good as some of your options, and it's not as good as it is on Demo. Still a pretty decent option on Survivalist though. And on Demo, it's actually pretty good. Then we have the Piranha Pistol. One Piranha Pistol on Gunslinger is still probably B tier, I would say. It's pretty good early on. You can block and parry with it, which is a huge advantage to Gunslinger since it's your only weapon that lets you do that. So this might actually move up to A tier. But yeah, still pretty good. You can still melee bash with it for anything that's close. And the dual Piranha Pistols, I would say, is S tier on Gunslinger, because you have a lot of DPS, you have a lot of damage, and you can block and parry with them, which is really good. The only kind of downside is that it's a little bit difficult to resupply them for ammo, but still very strong. The Medic Pistol would also move up to S tier for Gunslinger because it is a fantastic weapon to grab early on. Super cheap, you can heal with it, rack them up makes this thing absolutely insane. If you want to throw upgrades into it, it's still really good. You could solo Hell on Earth no problem with just a single Medic Pistol. You probably won't even need to upgrade it, and it would still be doing really well. And the single Spitfire, which we put into B tier, that one would probably move down to like D tier. It's really not worth taking when you can take another tier 2 option that weighs just as much, like the 1911, or you could go with a tier 1 option with the Grenade Pistol, the Medic Pistol, or the Winchester, and just have a better overall weapon. And then we have the dual Spitfires, which would be quite a ways down. They'd probably be like C tier for Firebug, or sorry, not for Firebug, they're A tier for Firebug, but like C tier for Gunslinger. So let's talk about the lever actions. First up, the Winchester. Winchester you can buy early on with Gunslinger, or you can potentially get it from your Sharpshooter or your Survivalist. This one's really good. This one I'd say is like A tier, maybe even S tier on Gunslinger, because it does scale really well with upgrades. Does good damage per shot. With Gunslinger, you can actually reload it really fast. Has really nice sights. Everything about it is just really good. And it also doesn't weigh that much. It only weighs 4. Fully upgraded, it weighs like 8, which is not that bad for it doing like 200 damage a shot or something when it's maxed out. That's really good. Centerfire is definitely S tier. Centerfire is crazy on Gunslinger. You get even more damage. It's like 165 base damage, and then it upgrades just as well as the Winchester, at least in terms of like percentage scaling, or almost as good. And it just hits like an absolute truck. It's really good on Gunslinger. It's really good on Survivalist as well. Both these are really good on Survivalist. These would probably be like ARS tier on them too, because they don't weigh very much and they hit really hard. Up next, the Deagle. Single Deagle I'd say is like B tier. It's pretty good if you want to get it early on. Does high damage. You can reload it fast. Doesn't cost that much because you're only paying for one of the guns. So that's pretty nice. Nothing really to complain about there. It's just really good. Dual Deagles on Gunslinger is absolutely like S tier. It's really, really strong. Does such high damage per second, probably the highest amount of damage per second that you can get from Gunslinger. You get 2 of these, you can reload them really fast, you can upgrade them, and they scale well with upgrades. They're still really good on like Survivalist. You can take 2 of them, and I'd probably say they're like A tier then. One of them would probably also be A tier, just as an off-perk weapon, since it still does high damage and it's fairly cheap. It's also really accurate at longer ranges, so like the Deagle is actually not really a joke in this game. It's pretty good. Single Rhino, kind of in a similar spot to these other weapons. Like C tier, I think it's fine. It does well against crowds. It might actually be a bit better than these ones, in all honesty, because of the sight on it. That's pretty nice. It also has a shrapnel shot, so when it hits something, it can split and potentially hit more enemies. This is unreliable, but it's something. So it is somewhat better at crowd control than some of these other options. Maybe not like the Winter Bite, but better than 1911 or 1858. Dual Rhinos, probably like B tier. They're pretty good. Good for crowd control, good for single target damage. Not excelling at them compared to some of the other weapons that we have for Gunslinger, but still a pretty decent option if you want to take them. Next up is 500 Magnum. Single 500 Magnum, I'm going to say is like A tier. I think it's actually really good. Does good damage per shot. It has really nice sights. It's really good for long range. Recoil reduction isn't a problem for Gunslinger, and this is again one of like the best off-perk weapons because it only weighs 3. It only costs 750. And you can one-shot so many things with it. It like one-shots rioters, one-shots all the small guys, can potentially punch through multiple of them. It's really strong on Gunslinger. 2 of these is definitely S tier. They're one of the strongest weapons that Gunslinger has. Really high damage per second. Kind of a slower reload, good range, and they don't hold too many shots, so you're going to want to pair this with something, but since these in combination only weigh 6, you could take a center fire, you could take the dual Deagles. Dual Deagles and dual 500s have been like one of my favorite loadouts throughout all the time playing Killing Floor. You could also take Piranha pistols if you want. They're just really strong. Dual of these is probably like A tier on Survivalist. Same with one of them. One of them is probably A tier on Survivalist as well. Really good if you want to take it. Actually, one of them is probably better because it counts as a sharpshooter and a gunslinger weapon. So that one might actually be S tier on Survivalist because you can get it early on. It does high damage and you get faster reloads regardless of what you want to take. And then we've got the 2011. A single 2011 is probably like C tier as well. It feels awkward to just use one of these. 2 of them is much better. Well, actually, this is probably like B tier, realistically. You can hit 2 headshots every time you fire this. Every time you fire it, it does fire out 2 bullets. It's basically just 2 1911s glued together. Less scaling than the 1911 if you want to upgrade it, but you get a whole bunch of bullets for it, and you can potentially use rack them up twice as fast. So it is better than the 1911s in a lot of ways. And 2 of them is S tier because of just how quickly you can hit rack them up and just clear off basically everything. They're maybe not as, though they're not as strong as like the Deagles, maybe not as strong as the 500s, probably not as strong as the Piranha pistols, but still really strong on Gunslinger. So yeah, still S tier. The Disruptor pistol is kind of an awkward one. I'm going to put this one B tier. It's decent. It doesn't weigh that much for a tier 4 weapon. It's the HRG version of the medic pistol. It does good damage with its regular shots. Its secondary shots aren't worth using because it just consumes too much ammo to be worthwhile. Has still nice sights like the medic pistol, and if you just want something that's like a stronger medic pistol, then this is a pretty good option, but you do have even stronger things than this if you want to take them. Then we have a single Glock. Single Glock I'm going to say is A tier. This is really good. This is basically you have a submachine gun on Gunslinger. These are just submachine guns on Gunslinger, so rack them up just stacks up amazingly fast. Does good damage per second, has a fast reload, very controllable with one of these. 2 of them makes it a little bit awkward to control, and same with the weight is a little bit awkward, but 1 is really strong. If you're going to take like one of these and a center fire, that's a really strong combination, or 500s, that's really strong. 2 of these I'd still say is S tier. They just clear through things so fast, although you can run through bullets really fast with them too. and they are a little bit difficult to control, as well as their weight is a little bit hefty, so you can't take as many things as you otherwise would with Gunslinger, but you can still take a lot of stuff with them. Still probably an S tier weapon though, really, really fun. And I think that covers everything with Gunslinger. I'm pretty sure. There's a lot of weapons with Gunslinger, but I think that went over all of them. Oh yeah, 1 Glock is really good on Survivalist too. 2 Glocks, not as much. I would say that they're actually lower on Survivalist. These are probably like B or C tier. This is still probably A tier on them though. And then like the 2011s are much lower because they're just not that great if you don't want to rack them up. So this is probably like C tier, and the single one would also be probably like C tier. I think that's everything that I've talked about now for all of those weapons.